The Seoul Grand Miri Hotel had hosted presidents, crowned heads, and tech billionaires. It had survived financial crises and scandals and the particular cruelty of old money protecting itself. But nothing, not one thing in its 40-year history, had ever stopped a room the way Fateema Osei stopped it on a Friday night in November. She came through the main doors at exactly 8:17, and the ballroom did something rooms rarely do. It held its breath. She wore gold. Not the timid, apologetic gold of someone hoping to be noticed. A deep, burning ceremonial gold, the kind woven into the fabric of Ghanaian Kent tradition, reimagined by her own hands into a floor-length structured gown with a high neck, an open back, and a skirt that moved like water poured slowly over stone. Against her deep brown skin, it didn't just catch the light. It became the light. Every diamond chandelier in that ballroom suddenly had competition. She walked slowly, because she had earned the right to make people wait. Welcome to Hab's Afro-Korean Stories. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. 12 years ago, she had stood in this same building wearing a gray staff uniform 2 sizes too large for her, carrying a tray of canapés past people who looked through her like she was furniture. 12 years ago, the man at the podium, Woo Jin's father, Chairman Han Seo Woo, founder of the Woo Miri Group, had delivered a speech about legacy, about blood, about building something that would outlast every single person in that room. He had never once looked in her direction. She had been 19, and she had believed that invisibility was something that happened to you. She knew better now. Tonight, Chairman Woo was about to name his successor before 350 of Korea's most powerful business figures. The future of the Woo Miri Empire was about to be decided in this room, under these chandeliers, with these people as witnesses. Fateema smiled at no one in particular and walked deeper into the ballroom. Let him try. There is a sound that lives inside people who have been discarded. Not a loud sound. Something more like the distant click of a door being closed firmly from the other side. Fateema had been carrying that sound in her chest for 12 years, since the afternoon Chairman Han Seo Woo summoned her to his private office on the 42nd floor of this very building and told her, with the practiced calm of a man accustomed to making problems disappear, that her mother had been naive, that the situation had been handled, and that Fateema herself was the kind of complication that thoughtful people resolved quietly. She had stood there at 19, on the other side of his enormous mahogany desk, watching the city of Seoul stretch endlessly behind him through floor-to-ceiling glass. He had slid an envelope across the desk without touching her hand. Inside it was enough money to start a life somewhere far away. There was also a document, a single page requiring her signature, confirming she had no legal claim to the Woo name, the Woo estate, or any asset connected to the Woo Miri Group. His wife, Madame Choi, had been seated in the corner, still as a painting, eyes aimed somewhere past Fateema's left ear. Fateema had looked at the envelope for a long time. Then she had picked it up. She had walked out. She had not signed anything. And she had made herself one promise in the elevator on the way down. She would never again stand on the other side of anyone's desk waiting to be told what she was worth. She would build something so undeniable that the world would have to look at her directly. And one day, she would walk back into this building dressed like everything they had underestimated. That day was tonight. What Fateema did in the 12 years between that elevator and this ballroom was not glamorous in the way people imagine when they hear a comeback story. It was not a single pivot moment, not one brilliant idea that changed everything overnight. It was grinding, relentless, unglamorous work done in full belief that it would eventually mean something. She had left Seoul with the money from that envelope, used a portion of it to get herself through a fashion design program in London, and spent the rest on nothing she didn't need. She slept in shared housing with 4 other students. She worked weekends at a fabric supplier, learning the language of textiles from the inside. She made mistakes with patterns and seams and business decisions and kept going. At 23, she launched Ori Collective, a luxury fashion label rooted in African design philosophy, structural elegance, bold geometry, fabrics that told ancestral stories in the language of modern tailoring. The fashion world in London and Paris received it politely, which is what fashion worlds do to things they are not yet sure how to categorize. Then her second collection was picked up by an editor who understood exactly what she was doing. Then buyers started calling. Then she stopped asking permission for anything. By 26, Ori Collective had showrooms in Accra, London, and Tokyo. By 28, she had quietly expanded into real estate and hospitality consulting, advising luxury hotel groups on the African and Asian markets, learning the hospitality industry from the inside the way she had once learned textiles. She had an eye for undervalued properties and a particular talent for knowing which buildings had potential that their current owners were too comfortable to see. Nobody connected her to Korea. Nobody connected her to the Wu name. Nobody knew. Not yet. The call she had not expected came from Wu Jin himself. She had been at her desk in her Accra office, reviewing architectural plans for a new boutique property in Nairobi, when his name appeared on her screen. She knew who he was. She had made it her business to know everything about the Wu Myri group from a careful distance. Wu Jin, the eldest son, 32, trained in finance at SNU, quiet where his father was loud, precise where his father was commanding. He had been photographed at charity events and business summits. He had never been photographed looking anything less than completely in control. She let the phone ring 3 times before she answered. Fateema Osei. He didn't say his name. He didn't need to. I know who this is, she said. A pause. Then, I thought you might. He told her he had found her through a mutual contact in the hospitality sector. He said he had been following Ori Collective for 2 years and had specifically tracked her consulting work. He said he had a proposal. His voice was measured and direct, not the voice of someone who played games, which made her more careful, not less. Your father's company is hosting its annual gala next month, she said when he finished. The succession announcement is that night. He didn't flinch. Yes. And you're reaching out to me now. I reached out to you, he said carefully, because the property acquisition your firm made in Jeju 6 months ago is one my sister's proposed venture depends on entirely. I don't know if you knew that when you purchased it. Fateema set down her pen. What makes you think I didn't? The silence that followed was the most honest thing he said in that entire conversation. She ended the call and sat very still for several minutes. Then she opened her calendar and looked at the date of the Wu Myri Gala. She had already known about it. She had already decided to go. She just hadn't decided yet what she wanted the night to accomplish. That decision crystallized now. She picked up the phone and called her lead designer. I need a gown, she said. The most significant thing we've ever made. I need it in 4 weeks, and it needs to make everyone in a room forget where they are for a moment. The gown took 22 days. Her creative director and head of design, Amara, worked with a focused intensity that bordered on sacred. The foundation was heavy silk Duchess satin in a deep ceremonial gold, the specific shade that appears in Royal Ghanaian Kent when sunlight hits it directly. The structure was architectural and high-necked in the front, entirely open at the back, with a long clean line from shoulder to floor. Across the skirt and train, Amara hand-placed hundreds of tiny beaten gold discs, each one individually attached, so the gown moved like chain mail made of light. The design drew from Ghanaian royal dress, from Korean pojagi patchwork geometry, from nothing that existed before this specific moment in time. It was entirely its own thing. When Fateema stood in front of the studio mirror and saw herself in it for the first time, Amara stood behind her and did not speak for almost a full minute. "You are going to walk into that room," Amara said finally, "and they are going to understand that they made an enormous mistake." Fateema looked at her own reflection with something that was not vanity and not triumph. It was closer to recognition. This was the 19-year-old who had carried a tray through a room full of people who didn't see her. This was what she had built from the money they had used to try to make her vanish. She pressed one hand lightly against the mirror. She was ready. The night before the gala, Fateema stood at the window of her Seoul hotel suite and watched the Han River catch the city lights. She had not been back to this city in 12 years. It smelled different than she remembered, or maybe she was different. Probably both. Her lawyer called at 10. "The acquisition documents were filed and recorded this afternoon," he said. The Wu Mairi legal team was notified at 6. His attorneys called our office 40 minutes later. "So he knows I'm coming. He knows LC Ventures acquired the Jeju properties. He may not yet know that LC Ventures is you. He will by morning," she said. "Yes." She thanked him, ended the call, and stood quietly at the window for a long time. She had spent 12 years building toward this night, and now that it was hours away, she felt no rage, no hunger for dramatic vengeance. What she felt was simple and clean. She had built something real. She had come back. And she was going to walk into that room and make it impossible for Chairman Honesio Wu to pretend, in front of 350 witnesses, that she had never existed. That was enough. That had always been enough. She went to bed early, slept without dreaming, and rose at 5 to watch the Seoul sunrise turn the Han River gold. She timed her entrance to the second. Chairman Wu had been at the podium for exactly 30 seconds, his voice filling the ballroom with the familiar cadences of a man who had commanded rooms his entire life, when the main doors opened behind the assembled guests. Every head turned. That was the thing about arriving behind an audience. Everyone had to move to look, and when they moved, they became part of the spectacle themselves. Fateema walked in. The gold of her gown caught every chandelier at once, and the chandeliers were extraordinary, 12 of them, hand-blown Venetian crystal, the pride of the Wu Mairi Group's flagship property. They had met their match tonight. She moved slowly, without hurry, because she understood that power is not rushing. The train of her gown followed her like a statement. She accepted a glass of water from a passing attendant with a small nod and kept walking toward the center of the room. To her left, she heard a sharp intake of breath that she recognized, without looking, as belonging to someone who had just understood something they weren't prepared to understand. To her right, somewhere in the third row, a chair scraped against marble as someone stood involuntarily. At the podium, Chairman Honesio Wu had stopped speaking entirely. She looked at him across the length of the ballroom, across 12 years and 350 witnesses, and smiled. It was a warm smile, gracious, unhurried, and carrying within it the specific temperature of something that cannot be taken back. "Good evening," she said pleasantly, to no one and everyone. "Please don't stop on my account." Hana Seo-woo crossed the ballroom floor toward her with the controlled urgency of a man trying very hard to look calm. The crowd parted for him and then closed again behind him, the way crowds always do when they sense something unrepeatable is occurring. He stopped 2 feet in front of her. Up close, he was older than the photographs suggested, or perhaps the photographs had simply not caught him in a moment like this one. "You weren't invited," he said, very quietly. "No," she agreed pleasantly. "I wasn't." His jaw tightened. "This is not the time or the place." "You chose a time and a place when you chose a gala over a conversation," she said. "When you chose a dynasty over a daughter." Something moved through his expression too quickly to name. He recovered himself quickly. "You need to leave." Fateema reached into the small gold clutch at her side and produced a folded document, crisp, single-page, clean. She held it out to him with the calm of someone who had rehearsed nothing, because she had needed to rehearse nothing. He took it. His hands were steady. His face, as he read, was not. The document was a certificate of acquisition. Fateema Osei, through her holding company, had obtained controlling interest in the 3 Jeju properties that anchored the proposed joint venture on which his daughter Soo-yeon's succession announcement entirely depended. Without those properties, the venture was structurally unsound. Without the venture, the announcement dissolved. What Hana Seo-woo had spent 6 months building, Fateema had quietly purchased out from under it with money she had made entirely without him. "You planned this." His voice was barely audible. "I planned everything," she said simply. "The way you taught me, actually. You simply didn't know you were teaching me." His daughter Soo-yeon appeared at his shoulder, sharp-eyed and precise, having navigated through the crowd with the focused efficiency of someone who ran toward problems rather than away from them. She took the document from her father's hand, read it in full, and looked up at Fateema with an expression that moved through several stages before settling on something complicated. "Who are you?" she asked. The room leaned in. 350 people stopped pretending to have other conversations. Fateema looked at Hana Seo-woo, not with hatred, not with the burning satisfaction of someone extracting revenge, but with something quieter and more permanent. Finality. The kind that comes after you have decided something is truly over. "I am his firstborn daughter," she said, clearly, at a volume the front rows would carry outward like ripples. "The one he paid to go away." The ballroom erupted. The silence that followed the eruption was dense and electric. It was Soo-yeon who broke it. She looked at her father for a long moment. He said nothing, which was its own confession. Then she turned back to Fateema, and what was on her face now was not fury. It was the specific expression of someone receiving information that recontextualizes a significant portion of their life. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "About you. I want you to know that I genuinely didn't know." Fateema studied her face carefully, looking for performance, for the polished social management that wealthy families develop like a second language. She found neither. Just a woman processing a truth that had been kept from her as thoroughly as it had been kept from the rest of the world. "I believe you," Fateema said. Soo-yeon looked down at the acquisition document. The venture was gone. The announcement was gone. The evening her father had designed as the culminating moment of his legacy had come apart at its structural center. She held the document out and returned it to Fateema with both hands, the Korean gesture of respect offered automatically, instinctively. "Then perhaps this was always more yours than mine," she said. Hana Seo-woo stood in the middle of his own ballroom and looked at his daughter. Not Soo-yeon. The other one. The one he had put in an envelope at 19 and sent away with money and a document she had never signed. She had built a fashion house. She had built a real estate firm. She had quietly, methodically, without his name or his money or a single resource that he had provided, constructed an empire that had just dismantled his succession plan in a single evening in front of everyone whose opinion he had spent 40 years cultivating. "You didn't have to do it this way," he said. His voice had lost everything that usually lived in it. "You made it this way," she replied, and her tone was not cruel. It was simply accurate. "I didn't come here to take what's yours. I came here so you could never again, in front of anyone, pretend that I don't exist." She looked around the room. The cameras. The journalists. The board members and the investors and the society correspondents. "Now you can't." By morning, Fateema Osei's name was across every major Korean and international business outlet. Not only as Hana Seo-woo's concealed eldest daughter, though that story ran everywhere, with photographs already viral before midnight, but as the founder of Ori Collective and LC Ventures, the 31-year-old who had built 2 separate empires across 3 continents while the industry wasn't looking closely enough. She sat in her hotel suite at 7 in the morning in a silk robe with coffee going cold on the table beside her, reading the coverage with the steadiness of someone who had already done all her processing the night before. Her lawyer called with news that 3 members of the Woo Myri board had requested meetings. 2 wanted to discuss restructuring conversations that might involve her consulting firm. 1 called simply to say that they should have paid more attention sooner. At 8:15, Soo-yeon texted. 5 words. "Can we talk, this week?" Fateema typed back, "Yes. Come to Accra." At 9:40, Woo Jin called. She paused over that one longer. Then she answered. He didn't say anything immediately. She didn't fill the silence. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "Not just for my father. For the call I made before the gala. I used you as a variable in a calculation that had nothing to do with who you actually are. That was wrong." Fateema looked out at the Seoul skyline, gold now with morning light. "It was," she said. "I appreciate you saying so." Another pause. "Then, for whatever it's worth, what you built is extraordinary. You should know that someone in that room, at least one person, was watching with nothing but respect." She was quiet for a moment. "Thank you, Woo Jin." She ended the call and sat with the city for a while. Her father's number appeared on her screen at 10. She looked at it for a long time. Then she set the phone face down on the table and poured herself fresh coffee. That conversation would happen, probably, eventually, when she decided she was ready for it. For the first time in 12 years, she was the one who got to decide. So here is what Fateema's story is actually about. Not revenge. Not a gown, though the gown was extraordinary. Not an acquisition document that collapsed a dynasty in a single evening, though it did exactly that. It is about what becomes possible when a person decides, once and finally, that their value is not a number someone else assigns. Hana Seo-woo handed his daughter an envelope at 19 and believed that money could make a person disappear. What he did not understand, what people who think in those terms almost never understand, is that you cannot erase someone whose knowledge of their own worth lies somewhere deeper than your rejection of it. Fateema did not return to Seoul to finally receive something she had been denied. She had stopped needing it from him long ago. She came back to make one thing permanent and witnessed. She existed. She had always existed. And now it was on record, in front of 350 people and every camera in the room, and he could never unknow it. The most powerful move available to any of us is the decision to stop letting someone else's closed door define the size of our life. You are not the table that had no seat for you. You are not the invitation that never came. You are not the envelope with money inside it and the unspoken instruction to vanish. Build the thing they said you couldn't. Do it quietly. Do it without waiting for permission. And when it's time, walk through those doors like you always had the right to be there. Because you did. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Hab's Afro-Korean Stories, because this is what we do here. We tell the stories that don't get told, the ones about women who were counted out and built empires anyway, the ones about love and legacy and the extraordinary things that happen when two worlds meet. Hit the notification bell so you never miss one. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share it with them now. We'll see you in the next story.